Troy City Council special meeting for May 2nd is a special study session on the budget is called to order. May we have the roll call, Mrs. Bartholomew?
Mayor Schilling?
Here.
Councilmember Beltramini? Present. Fleming?
Here.
Howard?
Here.
Irwin? Here. McGinnis?
Here.
Slater?
Here.
Quorum present. Tonight, as promised from the last meeting, we're in the proposed fiscal year 2011-12 annual budget and 3-year budget. We're going to have an overview of the 2011-12 budget for capital projects, enterprise funds, and a 3-year budget. And Mr. Zerlak, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Lamarato, who will be giving the presentation on these factors, after which we can discuss anything you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is our budget study calendar we have established. Tonight we'll be covering the capital projects, enterprise funds, 3-year budget. Next Monday, we have the wrap-up in the library decision, and May 16th, the public hearing and adoption. Once again, tonight we'll be focusing on the capital projects, enterprise, and a 3-year budget. The capital projects fund, we have a millage rate of 1.53 mils. That'll generate $6.4 million in property tax revenue. It's the same rate that we had last year, but last year that same rate generated $7.2 million in tax revenue. So tonight we'll go over some revenue expenditures, department expenditure summaries and maps and so forth, some of the major projects. This is just taking a look at the capital revenue from all sources, all funds. Tonight we'll be focusing mainly on the capital fund and the enterprise funds, but this is a look at total for the city, about $34.2 million in capital expenditures. $25 million from the capital projects fund, golf courses, almost $800,000, sewer fund, $1.8 million, water fund, $5.1, fleet maintenance, $1.5, and $32,000 from the aquatic center. To summarize some of the capital expenditures, we have water system improvements, 5.1, some of the large ones I'll go over. Sewer system, 1.8 million. Buildings and improvements, 10.8 million. That does include the transit center in that line item. We have public works construction, 10.6 million, just for streets, sidewalks, and drain improvements. Other items, 1.8 million, contains the $1.5 million transfer to the general fund, the capital projects fund. Some of the high-profile projects, we have local roads, over $3 million. Major roads, about 4.6. Once again, water mains, sidewalks, 500,000. Transit center, 9.2 million. And fire apparatus replacement, a little over $1.1 million. And the transit center in this budget and in the current year's budget, those are all federal funds, no city funds for that purchase, for that cost associated with it. Land improvements in total now, we're looking at all areas, 0.9 million. We have our golf courses, Sylvan Glen Golf Course has $750,000. They've been reserving funds each year for the last several years for the irrigation system improvement. That's pretty much, I think, what we're going to need to cover that project right now. A lot of that's some of the original water lines that are in there for the irrigation of the course. So if it goes, we can be in serious trouble there. So we have that money set aside now. It's a matter of how we want to put a plan together and how we want to tackle that project. Parks and Recreation, Section 36 Park. It's additional funds. A lot of it's, more funds are contained in the block grant, Community Development Block Grant Fund. That's to complete the Milverton Park. And this funding, with the block grant funding, should complete that project, which is very nice if you've driven by there lately on Maple Road. Land improvements continue. Department of Public Works, we have municipal parking lot improvements of $90,000. It's an annual allocation we have for that. We various parking lots throughout the city for resurfacing, restriping, any maintenance that needs to be done in any city parking lots. Buildings and improvements, $10.8 million. Once again, the transit center, $9.2 million, funded again entirely by federal grants. The energy efficiency community block grant program, we have about $321,000 left for that project, for our LED lighting projects and energy control devices throughout the city. An office renovation, $160,000. If needed, that will be to provide space for as we move departments together for staffing purposes and sharing staff. We may need some money to do some reconfiguration of some of the offices in City Hall. Continuing on building and improvements, Public Works has a total of $350,000 in the budget. We have fuel pump replacement, general repairs. There they also have in the general repair some office space, require renovations. We're moving building operations, our engineering field office that's on Crooks Road. We're going to be shutting down that facility and moving them over to Public Works. And also our Parks Garage, which is located in the Public Works area. We're going to move those people that are in that area all into the Public Works building. So they'll be able to better coordination of all those efforts. We also have a garage door replacement, re-roof the salt dome, about $110,000 project, and floor drain replacements at the Public Works facility. Some additional buildings and improvements for museum improvements. We have $50,000 in the budget for general repairs and the paver pathway repairs and replacement. As part of our agreement with the museum and the society who's taken them over, part of the agreement said we would contribute $50,000 a year in capital improvements. Whatever funds were not used in that year would carry over then to the next year, but they would get a $50,000 allocation for improvements to the facility. As far as general equipment, about $500,000. Most of it's in the police area. It's $400,000 there. It's a couple things: a biometric property sign-out equipment, which will be a digital sign-out of all equipment that's taken out of the building. In-car digital cameras, $150,000. It's the first year of 2 years for funding for new in-car digital cameras. And also mobile data computers, about $150,000. Community Affairs has $50,000 budgeted. That's the use of our PEG funds that have to be used. It's part of our franchise fee. They have to be used for capital expenditures relating to the cable broadcasting and so forth. Equipment office, IT has about a little over $84,000. Once again, that's we talked about last week. It's for the BSNA software upgrade. And the police department has $20,000 for some server equipment for their computer room. As far as vehicles, we have $1.5 million for vehicles. The fleet maintenance budget, which we covered last week on page 236, has a listing of all the vehicles that are up for replacement. Sylvan Glen Golf Course has about $33,000. That's for our golf carts, our lease payment. And the fire department for apparatus replacement, $1,125,000. It's for 2 of those pumper trucks that are shown there. Be similar to that. Built up those funds over the last couple years to provide it. When we can get 2 at a time, we get a little better pricing on it. Public Works construction, major roads was $4.6 million, local $3.2, sidewalks $500,000, and drains quite a large number at $2.3 million. The funding sources for all the Public Works construction from state and federal grants, $1,225,000 of that total amount. The county, $200,000. Local sidewalk program, $150,000. Major street fund, $1.1 million, and the rest comes from our capital fund, which is taxes and the fund balance reappropriation of $7.9 million. far as major roads, we have here we have listed the proposed year 2011-12 and looking out 5 years. So we have 6 years worth of projections here for a total of about $28.2 million in major road improvements over the next 6 years. This gives you, I know it's hard to read I can't read all the streets on there, but it gives you an idea, color-coded by year, where the various projects are. It is in the budget document, your notebook, on pages 171 through 172, list the projects, and then there's the description of the projects on page 173 through 179. You can see they're pretty much scattered around, so there will be improvements and roads torn up through most of the city over the next 6 years. I'll just touch briefly on the ones that are scheduled for next year in major roads. We have $1 million for slab replacement on Coolidge between Waddles and Long Lake, and on Rochester Road, South Boulevard heading south. And we also have $2 million for Beach Road for resurfacing between Waddles and South Boulevard. Those are a couple of major projects. Would like to turn this over now to our engineers, who can explain this a lot better than I can, about our funding, our road conditions on major roads, industrial roads, and local roads, and let you know they've scheduled out to 2015. Let you know what it's going to do, and how much money it takes to keep the roads in various conditions, and what we have budgeted.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the output from our RoadSoft pavement management software, and this pavement management software helps us determine the appropriate amount of funding that we should apply to our road system to keep it in a fair condition at this point, because that is the funding really that is available. What this graph is showing is that the trend is up for our major roads. Our expenditures, as John described, is about averages about $2 million over 6 years. And as you can see, with the $2 million expenditure, the trend should be up into the fair range. It will not bring us into the good, but it'll bring us closer to it over the next 6 years. Industrial roads, we have made significant progress on industrial roads over the last 5 years. And we are to the point now where our condition on industrial roads is really on the borderline of fair and good. And with that, we are able, over the next 6 years, to gradually reduce the funding for industrial road expenditures down to, average over the 6 years is about $0.9 million. This year it's a it's a $2 million expenditure. Next year is a $1 million, then it goes down to $750,000, $500,000 for the next 3 years after that. So we've made very good progress in the industrial road category.
We have our local roads for next year's 2011-12 plus going out 5 years. And once again, we're spending about $18.1 million over that period of time. The next year, our main projects, we have $2.3 million in slab replacement, $750,000 in asphalt overlay, and $100,000 in crack sealing. This gives you an idea. Once again, just about all sections of the city will see some improvements to the local roads, mainly your residential roads. And those projects are on page 181 through 185 in the budget notebook description. Local roads.
Also in local roads, we've made significant progress in increasing the overall average condition of the local roads. Previously, we were in the mid to lower fair range. Now we're inching up to almost on the border of the fair to good. And so we have determined that a $3 million investment in road repairs over the next 6 years would be the appropriate level to keep us in that fair range. We've done, over the last several years, mostly concrete slab replacements. We're going to continue to do that in the next budget year and the following budget year, but we are ratcheting that down and going to be doing more of asphalt overlays. Our asphalt roads are coming due for an overlay. The last time we did a major overlay program was, I think, 2003, and those were only on about half the roads. So the other half is coming due for overlay, and that's what we're going to be focusing on over the next 6 years. Probably in another year or so, we'll be doing a lot more than we will in the upcoming budget year. Thank you.
As far as the sidewalk program goes, we have try to budget $500,000 a year. You can see the next couple years. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we get into our 3-year budget. Not only for sidewalks, but also for roads. The next couple years going out, there's more strain on the capital budget. But over the 6 years, about $2.6 million in sidewalks. For next year, 2011-12, $350,000 is for a residential replacement program, $100,000 for major road gaps and sidewalks, and $50,000 for new construction. And here's the various, over the years, color-coded by year, where some of these projects will take place, and the description and more details on page 187 through 189 in the budget document. The drain fund, current year plus 5 out, about $4.4 million in drain fund work in the capital fund. Next year we have about $2.1 million for the aquatic center pond out here, which is not doing its job. It's basically filled in with silt now. It's not, all the water is moving down way too fast downstream and so forth, so it involves redredging that pond and also drainage work all the way through the city properties out to through Livernois. We do have a federal grant for $825,000 of this project. And there's $200,000 in there for miscellaneous projects throughout the year. Our 6-year drain fund projects, not a lot because the one large one there. Future years, there's not a lot of money spent in this area. Those can be found on pages 167 through 169 of the budget. Okay, that covers the revenues and expenditures for the capital projects fund. We can open it up now if you'd like for any questions on the capital projects fund.
John, I noticed on 24 on sidewalks, you've got $500,000 for this year, but then it's dropping to $300,000 in 12-13 and 13-14, and then back up to $500,000 again. Would you explain why
Well,
the
we
change?
know for sure for the next 2 years going out that we have in our 3-year budget, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, just reduce funding. We're hoping that maybe something will happen. It'll probably be those outer years will probably be also reduced down, but we taking a good look at the next 3 years going out, and that's what it'll provide. We're hoping to get back up to the $500,000, but it's early to tell right now.
Other questions on this section? Councilman Cummings?
Am I correct in that basically what we're doing on the roads, we're trying to maintain the existing infrastructure? We don't have any major projects where we're doing widening roads or changing them. Nothing to the extent that we've experienced on Rochester Road last year. It appears to me that we're doing just maintaining existing roads and getting them in fair condition versus trying to widen or improve existing roads.
That's correct. We do not have any major widening projects in the upcoming budget, and not for the next at least 3 years or so. The county does have a widening project, which is Crooks. It starts in Clawson from Maple up to 14 Equity, which is, Equity is just south of Maple. So that's the county project, but part of it is in our city, and that's the only widening project that will be going on this summer.
Good.
Anyone else have questions in this section? Councilwoman Beltramini?
I know, John, that we have no city funds in that $9.2 million for the transit center. There were city funds that were used to leverage for that $9 million. Those are spent? Okay.
2 or 3 years, a couple years ago, basically.
All right. The Civic Center, Aquatic Center pond that we're going to do the enhancements on, will those enhancements make it acceptable for ice skating in the winter?
Turn that over to our engineers.
No, it will not. In fact, what this project will actually do, it will, the pond that is there right now will disappear. And what will happen is the drain that runs through that will be channelized in a meandering fashion, and the slopes will be, there will be sediment removed, the pond will be widened, and the slopes will be flattened in order to get the detention capacity, but it will essentially turn into a wetland area, not a pond area, which is what it is today.
So it doesn't become a dry basin either. It goes
Doesn't become a
to
tri-
all reeds.
It'll look more or less like Sylvan Glen Golf Course that we did a few years ago, where you have a meandering drain that goes through it, and you have the wetlands adjacent to it. That's essentially what it would look like.
All right, and while you're there, if I may, please. In this document, there are major roads and there are local roads, both of which are classified as industrial roads. What makes the difference?
Well, the industrial roads are, for the lack of a better term, more technical term, are second-class major roads. They're roads like beach roads. Beach road is what we classify as a industrial. It's a, what would you call it, Bill, a major collection?
Under Act 51, there is no term industrial roads.
You
There's
sort of made that up.
locals, and they're within Act. So we needed something that was something other than a major road, something other than a local, not in Wheaton, Piedmont, are industrial roads, but they fall under a local road category in Act 51 funding.
So do I understand that in essence, the major roads are collector roads, kind of like Beach Road, and the others are local roads, but in our case, the industrial road classification has more to do with the kind of paving and maintenance and those sorts of
It
things?
has to do with the function of the road. It has to do with, it's an in-between, as Bill described. It's in between the majors and the locals, and there's really no classification for it.
But
So we
some
do
of
that.
them are, some of them are local and some of them are majors, so I'm kind of like, what makes that distinction?
There are guidelines in Act 51. A lot of them have to do with Atkins Road as a connection between two majors. There's no intervening. So that would be an industrial in the major road category. Mountain, Wheaton, and Piedmont are an industrial road in the local category. There is no industrial road term or moniker in Act 51. It's either local or major, depending on its function. Some of them have to do with a Corby that goes to a school from a major road. We use the industrial road term to try and clarify in the budget document and what we do to differentiate between majors and locals, to assign funding to it, because we identified it as an area that had been underutilized or underfunded in the past years, and we try to pick that up, and it better fits in the major road category than in the local road category. Some of our industrial roads, Kurtz, actually are federally eligible. We've changed them in the past years. We've changed those to be able to apply for federal funds for them, which you couldn't do on a local road.
So we've actually tried to make it, believe it or not, more clear.
And I guess that's why I'm confused, is because they're all called industrial roads, and there are some of them that are local, and some of them are major, and I understand that the local and major comes from Act 51 funding, but I still don't, I guess, understand what the distinction is.
If we were to use MDOT terminology, we would use terms like major road, secondary collector road, local collectors, and there's
See, I
about 3 or
understand
4
those.
others in there too. And so rather than have that thrown out there with definitions for each one, we just use major, local, and industrial, and we try to explain that best we can.
But when you throw in the industrial, and I guess the other thing, in looking at the 6-year plan, in looking at the mile of John R. from Long Lake to Square Lake, and then Livernois from Long Lake to Square Lake, John R. will cost us less. The construction will be sooner. Or John R. will cost us more. The construction will be sooner. Long Lake will cost us less in a total project. The construction will be later, probably cost more. And I don't understand why, because Livernois to me would cost more for right-of-way acquisition and those kinds of things. And John R. less, because it's less populated.
Some of it's got to do with other parts of the project. John R.'s got a big storm sewer that's going to go in the southerly mile.
So it's in the utilities and
There's a
that
lot of
sort
it in there.
thing.
A lot of our major roads, like we do with our other projects, we try and if we need to replace or upgrade a water main, we'll include that. If we've got a
Absolutely.
master storm drain that we need to put in, we'll include that. And on the John R., the 2 John R's, the northerly mile doesn't have as much of the big storm sewer pipe as the southerly mile.
Okay, so it's,
everything drains down to where the drain crosses just north of Long Lake.
it's the ancillaries then.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm
But
done.
all of those are county roads, the 3 that she's talking about.
Those are the future federal projects, the big widening and reconstructing the 5-lane roads.
Councilman McGinnis?
I have a couple of questions. I felt like last year we spent a lot of time talking about the process that you go through to determine good, fair, and poor. And I don't know if we need to get into as much detail as we did last year, although I appreciated it. But I thought it might be important to make the distinction. Obviously, it's a combination of a rating system and on-site inspections, but I think for people that may be watching at this time, if there's a way that you could give us some layman terms and potential physical characteristics that a citizen might recognize that would show us the difference between a good, a fair, and a poor road.
Okay, a good road has a PACER rating between 6 and 10, and good roads are in near new condition. They have joints that are very narrow, 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, and they're well sealed. As far as cracking is concerned, there's very little random cracking. There's some longitudinal and transverse cracks in concrete, but very few of that. So a good condition road is like a near new road surface. For asphalt, it's about the same thing. You don't find any random alligator cracking in the asphalt. There's some wear to it, but it looks in very, very good condition. That is a PACER rating of 6, and it goes up to 10, and 10 would be brand new and excellent condition. In fair condition for a concrete road, would be a road that would need some, and most of our roads in Troy are in fair condition, is a road that will need some concrete slab replacements, mainly because there could be joints that have widened to 4 to 6 inches. There's a lot of deterioration around the joints. There's random cracking. There's displacement near those cracks. There's drainage problems, and it's a road, in fair condition, is a road that not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily need reconstruction, it just needs a fair amount of slab replacements done, and that's what we've done a lot of over the last 5 or 6 years. In terms of an asphalt fair road, you have a road that has some alligator cracking, some transverse longitudinal joints. It may need joint seal, it may need a maintenance overlay, that sort of thing, but it's visibly worn, and it may be in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 years old. Poor condition road is just like what it says. It's a road that really needs to be torn out and replaced. A concrete road probably needs to be either milled and overlaid or pulled out and replaced. An asphalt road may need to be, it's beyond the stage where you can do a shallow mill and overlay. you may have to do a full depth asphalt pulverization and reclaim that material and add some asphalt to it and lay it back down and put an overlay on it. So a pour road, it's much more expensive, but it's pretty descriptive. It's a road that's pretty well shot, both asphalt and concrete.
And obviously, the main goal is, even though it's expensive to maintain, the cost would be far greater if any of the roads dip below that.
Below the fair range, absolutely. It costs about 5 times more to bring that road from a poor condition up to a good condition than it does from a fair to a good condition.
And my other question was about the projects that are outlined here. There's quite a few, and it goes into detail. I just think in terms of making citizens aware that projects are scheduled. I know for people in the department, you're looking at years on the horizon while you're planning these things, and they're in constant rotation to make sure that they're maintained. But in terms of people out in the community that may live in these areas that are slated to have work done, can you tell us about how they're notified, what that process is like?
What we do after the budget is adopted, first of all, in the budget, the map shows a box, a color box, which corresponds to the year that the work will be done. And then there's a number assigned to that, and then there's some language in there giving a description corresponding to that number, what the project is. As we go through the budget year and we plan and we actually do the construction of those projects, in our Troy Today magazine and on the website, we list each quarter what projects are going to be worked on and what exactly the work is going to entail. And for those maps, we no longer show just the little boxes with the numbers. We show exactly the streets that are going to be worked on from this point to this point and all of that. So it's a much more detailed map. You can look at it at a glance and say, okay, I live on that street and there's going to be some work going on. So that's how we do it during the year. It's on our website, it's in Troy Today, and on a project-by-project basis, we send out a letter to the residents saying that this project is going to be under construction. We do that probably 2 or 3 weeks before construction actually starts.
Great. I have a couple other questions just right now. Where'd you go? I just wanted to point out, just because I'm trying to pull some important information that's right in the document, but just to kind of call attention to them. There are some line items or items that are in here that indicate where something was budgeted and now it's moved to zero, and those are in reference to capital projects. I know you mentioned that, but if you could just point out what those were in terms of trails and City Hall, and if I understand correctly, those were decisions that we already made to transfer that money out, and this is where we're going to see that happen this year. So I just wanted to...
In the capital projects fund and most in governmental funds, all appropriations lapse at year end. So if you have a capital projects fund and you could see over it could be most of them are run over 2 or 3 years to get it completed. You'll see a large dollar amount in one year, maybe another large amount the next year, but you also see what was actually expended the year before, what we think is what we're estimating we're going to expend the next year, and then usually the difference between the two is what might be carried over to the following year. So there may be some confusion out there, but all expenditure items, they lapse at year end. It has to be reappropriated during the budget process if the project is going to be reinstituted or continued on or whatever. It has to take place during the budget process. So that's important to know, because some people might think that, well, I see these millions of dollars out for certain projects, and where is that money? Where did it go to? If it's not spent, and first of all, it normally dwindles its way down each year, it reduces as the project is completed. Or if it's no longer city funds, that money it goes into our fund balance in the capital projects fund. That is then reappropriated each year. In this current year budget, we have probably $10 million that's being reappropriated from capital project funds that are either in progress during the year or new funds that came in, and those are all reappropriated the following year. So there's no money sitting out there that everything lapses at year end. It has to be reappropriated. Council has to approve the budget or it's gone. As far as the Civic Center, we had about $3.8 million roughly. for total, for capital project funds, that last year, council said that they were going to no longer fund those projects. So you notice in this year's budget, in the current year's budget, you'll see there's probably money in there for those projects, and next year you see nothing in there for 11-12. That money, we're using $1.5 million of that to transfer to the general fund to delay layoffs in the public safety area. The other money is in fund balance, which will be used next year in our second year of the capital projects fund, $2.3 million roughly, to once again delay public safety layoffs. Those are showed as zeroed out. There's no money being reappropriated. That was for the civic center improvements we had, the trail system, and for some new park development funds. Those are all three main projects in the capital projects fund that have been there for years, that council last year decided to in order to delay public safety layoffs, they would zero those out. And you see in the budget, you can see, well, there's money in there in the current year's budget. Where did it go? You can see what's estimated to spend this year, nothing in that column. And that money falls in the fund balance. It's then reappropriated the next year. And 1.5 of that, once again, is for general fund, and next year, $2.3 million. That's pretty much how that works.
Yep, that's all right.
Any other questions in this section, Councilman Howard?
I actually have a more of an engineering question, but with respect to like an asphalt overlay, what percentage of the cost on something like that would be materials cost, meaning the actual cost of, say, for example, the asphalt?
I would say on an overlay project, it's probably about 3/4 of the cost.
So I imagine that asphalt costs are probably going through the roof.
They are, although we just opened bids on an asphalt project and it was much lower than we had expected. And our estimate, I think this was on your agenda a few meetings ago, and our estimate was about 50% too high, and we just anticipated prices that would be through the roof, and to our surprise, they were much, much lower than we expected.
But if things keep up, that could be a challenge.
Yes, it could. Most definitely.
Councilman Fawnin, you had a question?
Yes, a follow-up on the aquatic center pond. $2.1 million, $2,125,000 in the budget for that. That pond doesn't seem to be that old. Was there something wrong with the original design that it's not functioning properly? I read a little bit in the budget, but it just seems to me that it didn't last very long for us to be spending over $2 million to redo it now.
Well, it was built in the 70s,
Okay.
and so it's been there a long time.
Okay.
It's never been cleaned out. The sediment has never been removed. Previously, I think the depth was about 6-7 feet. Right now, I'm sure you could walk across the pond. It's that shallow. Also, if that pond were to be designed today, it wouldn't be designed the way it is. It's an inline pond. The DEQ would not permit that. It would have to be an offline pond, such that the water coming through during times of flood, it would have to back up and surge into that detention area rather than go into the detention area and out the other end. So it would be built differently today, and the type of pond that DEQ prefers most is the project that is being proposed, where we actually have 2 grants totaling about $1 million. If we didn't have those grants, we could still do the project, but it would be somewhat scaled back. We would just be cleaning out the pond, replacing the culverts underneath the road, and call it a day. So the grants expand the project to improve, because a new design would provide better water quality, better habitat, removal of invasive species, and allow for actually fish migration up the river, as opposed to what it is right now, where you have a barrier with the weirs across the pond at the southern end.
Thank you. I misunderstood. When we referred to it as aquatic center pond, I honestly was under the impression it was probably built at the time the aquatic center was built, which was much later than the 1970s. Okay, so
Yes, who else had a question? Councilwoman Mayor Pro Tem Kerwin?
I think, Councilman Howard, did you have another follow-up to what you had?
It was just one minor question with respect to the transit center. Are we, I imagine we're going to have some additional design and engineering costs. And I'm curious as to whether or not that won't be fit into this budget, or if we're going to have an additional appropriation.
I can respond to that. I had spoken with Steve Bandit, Bill Hootery, John Lamarato, and Mark Miller, and asked that question specifically, especially since we'll be on our own and it'll be a Troy Transit Center. There'll obviously be some redesign required. And Steve can respond better than I could, so go ahead, Steve.
What we are doing is we are reconfiguring the site plan, obviously to reflect all improvements being done on the Troy side, as Birmingham will not be involved in the project anymore. And we're revising the site plan, we're revising the EA, and we're using in-house staff to do that, and to get us through the environmental review process. Once that environmental assessment is approved and we move on to the next phase, which is final design, that's when we start spending money in that on consultants doing our design work, and that's where the funding will be in place to cover the final design.
Federal grants.
Federal grants, yes.
So I guess just to summarize, do we believe that we can still do this project with only the federal grant money and not additional city money?
The short answer is yes.
I mean from this point forward, I know we've spent some money.
Right. The short answer is yes. We have to have Canadian National switch their freight line, which is on the east side, over to the west side, and switch their passenger line, which is currently on the west side, to the east side, and then we can make things happen. The total cost expended by the city to date, after we receive the MDOT grant for preliminary site design, would be $419,000. Goes back to 2007.
Councilwoman, Mayor Pro Tem Kerwin.
And again, this will go to roads. And I do appreciate the definitions of roads, because I think that that really does help. Clearly, when we speak with our residents, roads are a major concern. They don't care if they're called major roads or industrial or anything else. Although I do agree with my colleague that calling it an industrial road, a secondary collector makes sense to me. Industrial road, for some reason, makes me think of zoning, and I would think of Rankin or some of those over in the industrial section. And so I kind of, if there were a choice for the layperson to understand, secondary collector makes sense. However, to get to good, and not to a good, but to a medium good, is the number still $30 million in order to bring our roads to good?
Well, on local roads, it's a little bit less than that. We've made some headway, and I think it was 2 years ago we ran our program. We estimated it was $31 million to bring it all to good, and we made some headway in that, and it's still a big number. It's $27 million to bring the local road system to a state of good in 1 year. So it's still a large number.
Mayor Pro Tem Kerwin, that's on the second page of the answers to the questions that were asked today, and there's a chart that indicates how much each year would be required, and then what it is for major and industrial, which is secondary collector, and local roads, and then county major roads.
And I appreciated the question asked and the information provided. However, I know that our home viewers don't have that opportunity to see, and I want to make sure that we're still on that same road, so to speak. Because again, folks who travel, and I was glad my colleague, Councilmember Beltramini, brought up the idea, the specifics about when are you going to fix John R., which is in great disrepair, and people go on it and go, my gosh. And then they hear a conversation about, well, we're fair to good, so but it makes no sense when one's out there driving. The same with the hot patches. When someone's just dropping that asphalt and you hear it go click, 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 click in the car, it's an irritation. And I know that the intention is good, but the frustration that we've heard from the community, whether it's at the community conversations or in common sense, have you seen the way this is in disrepair? to talk in terms of, well, it's a project that's going to come and we combine with county and the quality. It's something that we simply have to address. We're really going to have to talk about what our expectations are those. It's been a bane of my existence. It's 4 years now that I've talked about roads. No one out there understands, and nor do I, sitting here, why we have the inferior road work that takes place and how quickly it falls apart. And I think that there are some things we can control. Clearly on a county project, we have to go with those county bids, understood. But on other things, we can certainly do a better job, and it does take money. And it's something we need to be thinking about. Appreciate the charts that are provided, but it's something that comes to the forefront as we look to attract people to the city. If the impression is clump, 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 and if someone is losing a tire rim because of driving through our streets, that investment in one's car makes no sense when it could have come, in fact, of each person giving a little bit more. So I bear that in mind. One more thing, if I may, and it's back to sidewalks. Again, I know Councilmember Beltramini brought up sidewalks for many of you're completing 2 terms or longer now. And it $500,000 hasn't been very much as we go through, and now I see that it's going to $300,000. I understand it's a consequence of the budget, but again, $300,000 in terms of a sidewalk doesn't get us very far. And this has been a long-term project for this city. It concerns me to see that in the next 2 years' budget. That's a problem.
And the other thing that happens is people question, for example, on Coolidge, they question why every year we work on Coolidge, why can't we just do it all? So could we have an explanation? Of course, it has to do with dollars, but why is it when we do slab replacement, for example, on Coolidge, that we don't do it all in 1 year?
It's
Mr. Van
it's simply because we don't have enough money to do it all in 1 year, so we have to work until the money runs out, and then we're back at it the next year.
Okay. Because we do get people questioning that, they say, oh, they just worked on this, why are they working on it again? They don't realize that it's another section unless they live right there.
Madam Mayor, I was pleased to see that the county, in fact, held a meeting with residents regarding a future road project, and that was a good thing to see. When they start some of their road projects, when they invite folks in to explain that, I thought that was something, it was the first time I had seen it or become aware of that. And
That's for the Crooks Road one?
It was.
At the south end.
At the south end.
And they need to work at the north end of Crooks Road going up into Rochester Hills.
That's very disappointing because that was just done. And again, there's no way to explain, I can't explain why this happens. And that's the way the county standards are, and here we sit with it.
Okay, Councilman Horner?
How long is a concrete road supposed to last before it becomes low fare and a poor, major road, I should say?
I'm going to ask Steve to respond to that, but in your response, Steve, I think it would be important to talk about alkali silica rand as well, which live in cancer in concrete.
Okay. Generally speaking, concrete road is supposed to last 25 years. That is a 25-year service life that is to include maintenance along the way. And unfortunately, what has happened on many roads is that there has been no maintenance over that 25-year lifespan, and the road looks much worse than what it actually should be at the end of that time frame. Most of the major roads in Troy are county roads, and those roads are in the worst condition of the city. And I always say that people really don't care that it's a county road, they just want the road fixed. And over the years, the last 3 years, I think this is our 4th year, we've been using tri-party funds to do slab repairs on John R. And I think this is the 3rd year now that we're on John R. And that's another situation, why don't we do it all and get it over with? Well, we only get about $300,000 from tri-party, and we used to get about $500,000. And we met with the county this year, and actually they said that this would probably be the last year tri-party funds. So going forward after this coming budget year, I don't know who's going to fix the county roads, because the county doesn't, they say they don't have any money, and all they're going to do is coal patch and some hot mix where they pull out the old coal patch and put some hot mix in there. They do not do any concrete slab replacements. So the county roads are going to continue to get worse and worse and worse, because nobody is spending money on them except for our tri-party funds. Now there is, as John mentioned, there's a condition called ASR, alkali silica reaction. It came to the forefront in the 90s, and a lot of concrete that was done in the 90s won't last 25 years. It won't even last 10 years. And what happens is the concrete will start to have an alligator surface look to it, especially when there's a light rain and you can really see those minute surface cracks. It's a reaction between the silica in the sand and the alkali in the cement, and it forms a gel, and with water it forms a gel, and that gel is what forms those cracks, and that gel expands and contracts and causes that concrete surface to slowly explode. Some ASR is worse than others. Sometimes ASR will be evident, you can see it, but it doesn't deteriorate. Other slabs with ASR hold together for 5 or 10 years, and then all of a sudden they go. And it's really difficult to tell. Now, since the 90s, actually since the early 2000s, there have been additives developed for concrete that will combat the effects of ASR. And so I'm glad to say that the concrete that we're doing now is far superior to the concrete that was done in the 90s. Unfortunately, there is a lot of concrete around Troy that has ASR, and Big Beaver is an example. Big Beaver from Cunningham to Crooks, there are large sections that have ASR. They're holding up for the most part, but how long that's going to last, it's impossible to say. So ASR is, like I said, it's being minimized by additives now, and going forward, the product is very, very good. But back in the 90s, there were some issues with ASR that no one really knew about in this area. In other areas of the country, they had ASR condition, but here we didn't see it starting to occur until the 90s.
Why is that, if I might ask? I think that's the question a lot of our constituents have, is why did the roads that were in the 70s and 80s seem to last longer?
Well, the aggregate that was mined, that was used in the mix, is not the same aggregate that it was back in the 70s or the 80s. Something changed. The source of that aggregate changed, and that because there was more silica available to react with the alkali in the concrete, we have ASR. Also, concrete itself became more alkaline because of pollution control measures that were instituted at the concrete manufacturing plants, and that resulted in concrete having more alkali in it. Nowadays, you can buy low alkali cement, and that's one of the solutions to combat ASR is to use the low alkali cement. The other solution is to use GGBFS, which is granulated blast furnace slag, and that replaces a portion of the cement in the mix, and it makes a more durable mix. So,
Could this problem that happened in the 90s have been corrected if there was something in the contracts about the quality of the product? Or was that even looked at that time?
Well,
because we didn't
at
know
that
to
time,
put it in a
and
contract.
the thing about ASR is that it doesn't show up for about 5 years. And so you do a project, everything looks good, it meets specification, you pay the contractor, you move on to other projects. You have no idea that in 5 years or sometimes later that ASR is going to show up. And it did start to show up in the 90s on some projects, not all, and when it became apparent that this is a real problem, the concrete industry got to work on coming up with some solutions. Other parts of the country, especially in the West, in Texas, they've been dealing with ASR forever, mainly because their aggregate quality is so much less than ours, and it was felt at the time that Michigan has very good quality aggregates, and ASR was not known to be a problem up until that time.
Didn't we tighten up on our road contracts, Mr. Zerlang, a few years ago?
Yes, we did.
I think we have a 2-year warranty now on concrete.
And we did tighten our specs. We have an ASR provision in our specs that requires certain additives, and so going forward, the concrete is much better than it was in the 90s.
Just one little question.
Sir.
Is it, why is it that whenever we do road expansion projects that we always use concrete? I mean, other states, they use asphalt.
Well, that's a good question. We have two major road construction industries, concrete and asphalt. And concrete is ordinarily spec'd if the road itself, the existing road is concrete and we're widening it. It's typically done with with concrete. Not that it couldn't be done with asphalt, but it typically is done with concrete. And if you do have a concrete road where that you don't have ASR problems, the maintenance in the long run is less than asphalt. When you do have ASR, or if you do have other problems with the concrete, it can be more than the asphalt. But typically, we've done concrete. I don't know, Bill, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, basically it comes down to the pavement itself. I mean, concrete's a rigid pavement, so it transfers a load much better than an asphalt pavement. We've got very high volumes here, very high truck counts. I mean, like a Rochester Road. Problem with asphalt, they've got new mixes now that we've started to use called Superpave, which is it's a more durable pavement than us using it on most of their mainline work. We used it on Stevenson. It looks a little more open. The surface isn't quite as smooth as what you see in a residential subdivision. It carries the load much better. It's not a real fine mix like you'll see in a subdivision. Biggest difference between the two is an asphalt pavement, if you put a tire, the tire wants to push down, so that load is going down. And on a concrete, it's rigid, so it's that load moves across that slab. So it's not a point load, it's a distributed load. It carries the load much better. And if the concrete is designed correctly, it's built correctly, used in the right fashion, design life benefit cost analysis is a better product. And that's why we use concrete on most all of the major roads. You'll see asphalt a lot on the other secondary type roads and residential areas.
We see concrete roads in subdivisions that have been there for 35 years, and they look almost new. They're not the same color, but they look almost new. So concrete, when it's done correctly, a quality product, good quality control, it can last a long, long time, and it's very low maintenance. Unfortunately, with ASR and other problems, there's a lot of concrete out there that is really falling apart prematurely.
Yeah, I guess I have a long-term concern because, you know, we have built a lot of roads in the last 11 years or repaved a lot of concrete roads, and it seems like they haven't lasted very long. And it's, you know, we always want to try and get it, you know, I think trying to get into this good area is the same thing as saying trying to be one step ahead on a maintenance schedule. And so it's a little frustrating kind of being the, you know, I'm sure it's frustrating for all of us, just, you know, building this stuff and, you know, it doesn't last.
Right. We have used asphalt, as Bill mentioned, on Stevenson. We've used asphalt there. But predominantly our choice is concrete, and mainly because when it's done correctly, it'll last a long time in maintenance as well.
Okay, if there aren't any other, we'll go on to enterprise funds. Okay?
The next grouping of funds we'll take a look at are our enterprise funds. And they're used to account for services provided to citizens and users, financed primarily by user charges. And here we'll talk about the Aquatic Center, Sylvan Glen, Sanctuary Lake, golf courses, the sewer fund, and the water fund. Aquatic Center Fund has revenues about $497,400 for next year. A breakdown of the charges for services, about $152,000 of that is from seasonal passes, $195,000 from general admissions to the park, and $120,000 for water programs. Expenditure side, we come out to about $579,000, which overall is a 3.5% decrease from the current year budget, and included in that is $170,000 in depreciation. So you can see the revenues over under expenses, a little better for next year. But one of our things we try to look at is to try to have the revenues meet the expenses minus the depreciation. If you take out depreciation, we'll have $88,000 to the good for next year, which is one of the better years that they've had in quite a while. As far as capital for the Aquatic Center, they have some security cameras, change the sand in the filtering systems, repaint the bathhouse, and some cave repairs for the water slide areas. Sylvan Glen Golf Course. Once again, this is turned over to Billy Casper Golf for the operations and maintenance of both our golf courses. They're projecting a little increase in revenues for next year. Interest and rents are going down a little bit, and operating transfers, then that's a utilization of their fund balance, which mainly is going to work towards paying for the capital improvements that they have. Sylvan Glen Greens, you can see, well, it went down quite a bit. Well, since we have a contract now, the only thing that's left on Sylvan Glen Greens is the depreciation cost for the golf course. All the other fees, all the other costs related to the operating of the course are under the Sylvan Glen Pro Shop. This budget was developed by Billy Casper Golf and reviewed by our recreation department and myself, and we pretty much agreed to what their numbers and projections they have. It's their operation, basically. Of the Sylvan Glen Pro Shop, the $951,000, about $917,000 are contractual services, and the remaining small portion is we still get an administrative fee because we do oversee that contract. We have, once again, we talked a little bit earlier about the capital outlay of $783,400. To show you how their operating expenses look without using fund balance, their operating revenues will cover their operating expenses and still have $131,000. They're looking about generating about $131,000 for the course. Once again, this is not part of the general fund. It's a separate enterprise fund, and that's how the revenues are generated and used for this purpose. Sanctuary Lake Golf Course. Once again, Billy Casper operates this one. The revenues look like they've gone up quite a bit. Well, they have, but the reason why is that now they are operating the restaurant. Before, we just got in our past operations, we just received a small portion of rents. You can see basically about $6,500 a year on a return from the restaurant provider. Now that money that they have includes the restaurant operations, a beverage cart, and then all the golf fees. And listening to the latest, with all the closing of golf courses around the area, they are projecting, the golf industry is projecting an increase, actual increase this year for the first time in golf course usage, which is good to hear. It should help us out. And they're projecting at Sanctuary Lake, they've got a lot of new programs in place. It's the first time that we had one review, and we'll have another review by Billy Casper. But it's the first time that I've played there and received an email notice. They want your email and address and so forth. An email wanted to know how you like the course and so forth. First time I've ever had that in all the years playing at the golf course. And they actually got a call back, which was from that one person who was here, who just want to let Lemrata, we are reviewing and we are listening to your comments, and he gave me a call because I left my phone number on that, and he did call and say, I mentioned a couple nice things they had on Sylvan Glen, some new T-box marker, yardage markers and so forth, and the course was in pretty good shape before all this rain and all that, but the course was in good shape for this early in the season and not being that nice of weather up to this point. So they are making a lot of, they have a new card that you get as you go in there. Every time you play golf, you get credits and so forth, and they send you, I guess they'll send you, if you play a lot, whatever, they'll send you some more advertisements and more things to get you out there to golf. So they are making a lot of steps. I think they took the first year to kind of get the feel of the whole course and all that, and they're looking at for major improvements. As far as the expenditures go, once again, the only thing under greens is the depreciation cost of about $300,000. All there, the pro shop is once again Billy Casper Golf of $924,000 and a debt service of $886,000 for the golf course. If you look on a cash basis, actually they're projecting about $125,000 improvement over the past year in revenues over expenses. So that's about 1/5 or 1/6 of the way we need to get there, but they are looking at some improvements, and hopefully with a better year, maybe that'll even be better than that. So I think we're going in the right direction there. It's going to take several years, and still improvements in the economy also that go along with it. But I think we're starting to see some of the things that they could do out there at the golf course, and I think should be beneficial for us. Sewer fund. We have our proposed rate, which I'll talk about a little bit after we go through the water and sewer funds, times our estimated consumption will generate roughly around $12 million for sewer operations. Sewer administration includes, most of it's for the fees that we do pay for the disposal of our sewer. There's a 10% increase passed along to the city for those services. Maintenance is basically our cost on maintaining all the sewer lines in the city, which we have about 398 miles of sanitary sewer lines in the city. The revenue generated will cover our operating expenses and a portion of our capital improvements. We'll generate about $718,000 over our expenses and cover $700,000 of the $1.8 million in improvements. We do have funds that have built up in that fund over the years, and if we ever had any major problems, we do have funds where we would not have to go out and bond or whatever for replacement and maintenance. They spend roughly about around $2 million or so each year on capital improvements to the sanitary sewer lines. Looking at the sewer system again, 2011-12, going out 6 years, a little over $10 million over that period of time. And all these improvements are made possible by the rate structure that we review each year during budget time without the need to issue debt and to incur the costs associated with interest and so forth on that. So our rates are designed to cover not operation maintenance, but also to cover the improvements to our system. There's just a 6-year capital chart where various projects are going to be. Descriptions are on our pages 227 through 231 in the notebook. The water fund, once again, uses our new proposed rate times our estimated consumption. That'll generate about almost $14.5 million in total revenues of $14.6 million. And our expenses are broke out into these various categories that they break out there and allocate time to. That fund, it really is for budgeting purposes. Wherever the time is needed, that's where it's spent in total. But this is their estimate allocation of those expenses. That's scheduling out all the bodies that are assigned to their division in water and sewer over the various areas. The Detroit water increase, you may have read in the papers, about a 10% increase in our water commodity rate. But then, which wasn't well publicized, whatever that they came out last couple of years, they now have a fixed, their fixed cost recovery, which for the construction and capital and Detroit and so forth, and to get the water out to Troy, so forth. That is about a 5.7% increase over above that. So we're looking at about a 15.7% increase in our water rate for next year. Once again, the operating revenues here, we aren't passing along the full 15.7%, as we'll talk a little bit later, in a rate increase. We are passing along about 11% of that amount. So we are absorbing some of that, and you can see our revenues over, we still have revenues over expenses with that, but we have expenditures of about $5.1 million. I'm sorry, $5.1 million in capital, and we only have about $480,000 to go towards that. We have 540 miles of water mains in the city of Troy. Looking at the capital needs for water system going out 6 years, the total is about $32.3 million. And here you can see we put an average of about a little over $5 million each year into our system. So we could avoid and target main areas where we have some breaks and so forth, but we don't have near the breaks of a lot of other cities that are surrounding us who don't put any money into their maintenance. 6-year water program, a map of the various areas, descriptions on page 212 through 218 in the budget document of the various projects, the dollar amount and what type of project it is. Looking at our water rate history per 1,000 cubic feet, the water rate for 11-12 we're proposing is $28.10 per 1,000 cubic feet, and sewage is $22.90 per 1,000 cubic feet. You can see down below there we've scheduled out the last several years, and actually for 2010-11 we actually had a reduction of 5% in our water rate, and we passed that along to the residents with a 5% reduction there. Actually, it's a little more than that, but we passed along 5% of that amount. This year, we're looking at about 12% increase in the water rates of the 15.7% that Detroit is passing along to us. That's a $3.02 rate adjustment per 1,000 cubic feet. On the sewer side, we have a 10% increase, and that's a $2.08 rate adjustment. So in total, about $5.10 adjustment per 1,000 cubic feet. Well, a combined rate now of $51 per 1,000 cubic feet, up from $45.90. How we came up with the rate is we looked at our water consumption, and we used, first of all, we estimated what we're going to be at for the remaining of this year. We used our actual numbers through budget time, which is basically about 6 or 7 months worth of actual numbers for this year. We took a look at the last 3 years and averaged out what we did for the last remaining 4 or 5 months of the year. We came up with 2011 estimate of almost 500 million cubic feet, 499, 260. Then we'll take a look at 2 years actual and the 1 year estimated year, and come up with an estimated consumption for 2012, and we're coming in around about 481 million cubic feet we're estimating for 2012. So based with that consumption, we then apply the rates and so forth in our operating cost and capital and things, and then that's how we came up with our rates. Our average residential user uses about 3.9 thousand cubic feet per quarter. So you take a look at the average residential bill for the water, it's going to go up $11.78 per quarter, and sewer about $8.11 per quarter, a total of about $19.89 per quarter. So every 3 months, about less than $20 increase in their water and sewer bill. Do I have there any questions on the enterprise?
If the Detroit Water Board had not increased their rate, recovery costs, and et cetera, would the water bill have remained the same for the Troy residents?
Probably pretty close.
And because of our instituting our sprinkling
That
system,
still has helped us out.
then
If you look
how
at
much
some-
does that help?
Well, last year it helped us out tremendously. It's our peak demands on the system, which we've curtailed quite a bit. Depends on last year and the year before. You could see that consumption was probably at one of its all-time lows in 2010. Actual consumption of 449 million. I mean, probably one of the all-time lows. A lot depends on the economy, on the wet summer and so forth, whatever you may have. So our water restrictions still help us out. Otherwise, you look at some of the rates that were in there, some of them were over 15, 20, 30% increases for this year. And we're looking at, on our fixed rate, on the fixed cost, Detroit had used a larger or more consumption for Troy than we're projecting. So we try to get a little bit more realistic consumption where we think it's going to come in. Normally in the past we've been pretty close on those numbers, but as looking at our trends here and the economy and so forth, we lowered that number down. So what that means is you have less consumption to cover that rate increase. So it's going to bump up your rate a little bit more than what it would need to be. We take a look at this every year, and last year, for example, we had a 5% reduction. We'll see what happens this next year. But as long as we keep our restrictions in place, that only helps us.
Okay.
It would be a lot worse.
Any other questions on this part, Councilman Harley?
On the aquatic center, how far away are we from having significant capital expenditures on major components of that entity?
I'm not sure exactly on that, but I do know that we continuously put money, resurface the pools. We've done quite a bit of work over the years, and we continue to do that. We don't let things, like you can see this year, the changing the sand filters, repainting the bathhouse, cave repairs, and so forth. But we try to keep up with the maintenance, so we're not going to be, at some point it's going to become, but we try to keep up with the ongoing maintenance. Each year we put in, there were 30 last year we put in $61,000 into it. So we try to put money into it to prolong the life as long as we can, but I'm not sure exactly what the life of that facility would be.
Yeah, I imagine at some point, you get to the point where this isn't, you're going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in some particular year when we get to the end of the life of major equipment. Yeah.
Any other questions on this section? A break is scheduled now before we do the 3-year budget. So we'll take, you want 5 minutes or 10? Council?
7.
7 in between? All right, that's it. I'll 7 minutes from now.